called blood. So it is. Let's examine it closely. Before we examine the biblical proof whether it is allowable for a Christian to take blood transfusions or not. So, blood has many components. The witnesses break it down to 4 major components, the whole blood. They're saying that blood is composed of, these 4 components is the red blood cell, the white blood cells, the platelets, and the plasma. The red blood cells is the one who carries oxygen to the whole body. So it is very important that you have an ample amount of red blood cells circulating on your body, because lack of it will choke all your vital organs and it will eventually die. So red blood cells does not carry only oxygen but all the other nutrients that we take up in our body. That is the red blood cells, the function of the red blood cells. The white blood cells is the army or the protective part of our blood. It is the one who fight invaders like bacteria and viruses within our system. So they are the one tasked to protect our body from any infections. And it has so many functions too. And platelet is the binding factor of our blood. And if our platelet counts is so depleted, we will bleed profusely, as in the case of dengue fevers or the hemorrhagic fever, because the dengue virus will deplete the production of your platelets, so your platelets count will drop down to a very low level, in which you will have a hemorrhagic or hemorrhage, and because of that you will have a hypovolemic shock. And the plasma is the watery parts of our blood. So it is the solvent portion of our blood. The witnesses prohibits the transfusion of the whole blood of the whole component of the whole part of the blood, the whole blood, with all the major components in it. And also, they prohibit the transfusion of any of the 4 major parts of the blood, because they break it down from these 4 major parts. But then, they allows the use of blood fractions, meaning the small portions of blood to be administered on their members. And they say that they leave it to the consent or the decision of their members to take up that blood portion or not. So that's it. So during the time that the organization has released the Kingdom Ministry, which contain that new policy regarding blood transfusion, I was the one being tasked to give the part to give that part on the congregation. So when I'm reviewing the kingdom ministry is the monthly gazette of the Jehovah's Witnesses. For those who are not Jehovah's Witnesses, the monthly gazette of the Jehovah's Witnesses, which they discuss in their midweek meetings. I was the one who was being tasked to present it to the congregation. When I'm reviewing the article in the kingdom ministry, I have concluded, I have seen that by allowing the fractions of blood to be used or be available to the members of the Jehovah's Witnesses, it has rendered the doctrine or the policy or the prohibition of the blood transfusion, it has rendered it altogether useless, futile. Why did I say that? Because think of this. In that particular kingdom ministry, they did not mention any small parts or fraction of the whole blood which is prohibited to a Jehovah's Witness member. So the presumption here is that all the small fractions of the whole blood is allowable to be used by a witness patient if his conscience allows him or her to do that. So, what the heck? Why prohibit the 4 major components or the whole blood if you are allowing the use of the small fraction of blood? Isn't all, if we sum it up, all the small components and miniature parts of blood, it will sum up to the whole of the compound, the whole blood, or the 4 major components of blood. So, it is beautiful. It is unreasonable. Now, if it is allowable or unacceptable to use platelet, and platelet is composed of platelets amounts to only 1% of the total blood volume or the whole blood. Why is it on the kingdom ministry, their new policy on blood, it is allowable for their members to use hemoglobin? By the way, how much of the whole blood does hemoglobin amounts to? According to the hematologists, it's amounted to 14 or up to 15% of the total volume of the whole blood. So, and if it is allowable for a 15% of the whole blood, why is not allowable for the 1% component of the whole blood? And that is the same with the white blood cell. The white blood cells amounted to only 1% of the total volume of the whole blood. So, why is it unacceptable to use white blood cells if it is allowable to use hemoglobin, which is 14% of the total volume of blood? And if it is not allowable or unacceptable, it is unacceptable to use white blood cells. So, might as well, the Jehovah's Witnesses prohibit their members from giving their newly born babies milk from their breast. Because during breastfeeding, the mother is technically or literally transfusing high volume of white blood cells to their newborn baby in the process. So, might as well they might as well prohibits their member to give their newborn milk from their breast. Also, it will become so absurd if they do that. But that is the facts according to how they break the components of blood and how they decide which is allowable and which is prohibited. They are so inconsistent. They have to explain. They have to explain that factors or that situation. So, it is very, very inconsistent. Some blood products, small products that they use, the witnesses use, can only be available if a blood pool of so many bloods from so many people will have to donate or to give their blood on that for the purpose or can be used for the purpose of that particular blood product or blood fraction. So, if it is prohibited to use blood, so they must prohibit that also because it needed many bloods to be extracted from donors in order to that particular injection be available. So they might as well prohibit the use of that blood fraction. And what did the blood institutions like the Red Cross will do with the remaining part of the blood? They will transfuse it. Of course. What do they think? What do the witnesses think about it? Do they think that after extracting that product, the blood institution or the blood banks will throw out all the remaining part of the blood? So, they know it that the blood banks will let it be used to be transfused to other patients. So, it is in direct violation of what the Bible say to do with regarding with blood, to not to use it in any matter but to be covered with earth on the ground. So that is the inconsistent. And one more thing here is their doctrine of not accepting organ transplant. During the 1940s, it is prohibited for the Jehovah's Witnesses members to accept blood transplant. So, like the prohibition on the transfusion of blood, it cost many lives on many of their members because even if they do have the capacity, the financial capacity to have that transplant, because of the prohibition of the watchtower or the governing body, they did not proceed on that kind of treatment because of the prohibition. But in the 1980s, the Watchtower Society or the governing body has allowed the witnesses to accept organ transplants. Now, the question is this: why did they prohibit it in the first place during the 1940s? It is for this reason, that the organs to be transplanted to the patient has a considerable amount of blood in it. Because it must be alive organ for the operation or for the transplant to succeed. So, it contains a considerable amount of blood in it. So, that is their argument back then. But, during the 1980s, they have abandoned that doctrine. So, we will not be surprised if later on, the governing body, after making so many consideration or for whatever reason there might be, they will also abandon their doctrine on the blood prohibition. But until then, many witnesses will die because of that unmerciful practice or policy on the part of the governing body regarding the blood transfusion. So, let's go now to let's move on to the central part or the biblical part of this issue. The contention, the number one contention of the Jehovah's Witnesses is they do not accept blood transfusion because it is prohibited in the Bible. But if we will read all the prohibition about blood in the Bible, we cannot read. We cannot read any statement then there regarding or mentioning blood transfusion. All the Bible is saying is that we must not eat blood. So, their contention there is if the patient cannot eat, the doctor will keep him alive by intravenously, by giving him dextrose with minerals that is needed to sustain the body. So, they're saying that if it is prohibited to eat blood orally, so they have made the conclusion that it is also prohibited to inject it directly on your veins. They even have that illustration in their literatures of a man being transfused of wine or alcohol. There in the caption, they're saying that if your doctor told you not to take up alcohol, are you going to transfuse it, inject it directly on in your veins? That I found that illustration ridiculous, because in the real life there is no one, even the worst alcoholic in the street will do that in his right mind. So that illustration doesn't happen in real life. So the use of that illustration is somewhat deceiving. It is deceiving because they're using an illustration that does not happen in the real life. So let's go back to the Bible. Yes, the Bible is saying that it prohibits the eating of blood because it is holy. So now, if it is holy, according to the witnesses, it cannot be used to save life in a life-threatening situation. Even in a life-threatening situation. But is it really the case? There is a time when Jesus was in his ministry, that the religious leader, which is his opposer, accused him and his closest associates of violating the sacredness or the holiness of the Sabbath. That is why our Lord has to make his defense. What I'm alluding to here is the event being mentioned at chapter 12 of Matthew, verses 1 to 5. There, it was related that Jesus was crossing a field of grains, and his disciples, because of hunger, has plucked some of the grains and ate it to relieve their hunger. But the onlookers, the accusers and critics of our Lord, has accused him and his associate of violating the sacredness of Sabbath. So Jesus made the defense by saying that David in the old times has eaten the bread of presentation in the tabernacle, which the priest Ahimelech presented to him when he asked for food. Well, for my viewers, the bread of presentation is not allowed to be eaten by anyone else in the community, because it is exclusively for the consumption of the priest and his immediate family who is living with him in the house. For example, if his daughter has already married, she is not allowed to eat from that bread of presentation anymore. She will be allowed again if she became a widow and go back to the home of his father, the priest again. So that bread is a holy bread. But then Jesus used that illustration to defend their situation. And he also, our Lord also, has mentioned the priest in the temple. Because during a Sabbath, the peoples should not do any kind of work. But Jesus mentioned that the priest inside the temple is busy doing their chores the whole day of every Sabbath. And Jesus said that they are not violating the Sabbath. So, the point of our Lord here is this. If something is holy, and you use a holy thing, or you put it on together, two holy things, there is no violation of God's law. There is no violation. In fact, in other verses of the Bible, Jesus asked his critics that even during the Sabbath, they told his critics that even during the Sabbath, they rescued their animals from hurt. If their donkey has fallen to a pit, they will rescue it. And Jesus told them that there is no wrong about it, because it is the right thing to do in that kind of situation. So it is only an animal. What more if you are to save a life which is in a clear and present danger, because he has lost a huge amount of blood. And he is needing a blood transfusion. If the blood and the bag to be transfused is holy, even if it is a blood of a prisoner, even if the donor of that blood is a prisoner, it is holy because it represents life and it represents the holiness of God. The question is this: isn't the blood or the life of the dying patient also holy? So if it is holy, then what violation? Are we going to make? If we are going to transfuse blood on the dying patient, just for his life or her life to be saved, just to save his life. So that question will be a difficult one for the witnesses to answer, because the reality is there is guilt on their hand, blood guilt on their hands, because of the so many deaths that their members has suffered. Too bad that prohibition of the transfusion is still going on inside the religion of the Jehovah's Witnesses. So, if you're watching this video and you're not a member of that organization, think it out. If you are going to join that religion who will endanger the life, your life and the lives of your loved ones, if you become a member of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And if you are a member of the Jehovah's Witnesses, think of the points that I have discussed here, and may this awake you from your long time slumber, and may the Lord grant you to master all the courage to make a decision to leave that blood guilty organization. Thank you, and have a pleasant afternoon. If you find this video to be informative, please subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to pass it on to others, to share it to many people as possible, in order for them to have a clear understanding of this.